Welcome to the Explorers Podcast with Ken Bowen. Here, Ken connects with friends and peers to discuss issues in the world and practices to improve one's biblical perspective.
I want you to welcome you to Explorers, and we are with Jonathan Witt of the Discovery Institute. And Jonathan just informs me that he also taught literature as well in Texas and Lubbock Christian University. And it shows because Jonathan's work, A Meaningful World with Benjamin Wiker, is a nice combination. And he was just describing how, like me, he's quite a generalist, and he loves to synthesize and put things together. So I want to welcome you in our midst, and thank you for being a part of this, our time together.
Thanks for having me on, Ken.
Yeah. Share what you just were sharing with me, this little observation you were making.
Oh, right. There's so much kind of emphasis in our kind of modern technological society on specialists, and they do a lot of wonderful work. But I said the shameless generalist also has an honorable role to fill, and we can often make connections that the specialists overlook.
You see a larger picture. And to some degree, I don't want to over push it, but in some degree, it's almost what Ian McGilchrist does with the two sides of the brain and the whole idea of the left side and the right side, but the left being a good servant, but a poor master. Whereas the right side of the brain, you're seeing connections and meanings. And that's what you're talking about in a meaningful world. And so the left side will help us analyze the situation, but the right side will give us the meaning context. Does that make sense in your thinking?
Yeah, that's a good framework. And I know there's some debate about how much the left and right brain exactly maps, but it's a good rubric to think about how we have different strengths mentally. It's funny you mentioned that. I remember I took back in high school that we took a right brain, left brain test, and I had 12 right. There were 36 questions, and my answers ended up being 12 right, 12 left, 12 middle. So I always felt very balanced on that front.
That's a good.
Maybe I was just confused, but I took it as a good sign.
No, that's a good sign. I think that gives you a broader map of reality because you're using the fullness. And as you know, the corpus callosum is what's presumably involved in integrating the two hemispheres. We know from Roger Sperry's brain studies and so forth like that with split brain and so forth. It's an astonishing and wondrous thing that the more we learn about the brain, the more we realize we can't even comprehend how it works.
Exactly.
Our minds reveal that we don't understand it. What's that?
Oh, and I was going and how hard it is to take a purely brain first mind. The idea that the mind is just an epiphenomena of brain chemistry, that gets harder and harder to hold to that view the more we're learning about the mind and the brain. Multiple lines of evidence suggest that the soul is real, and there's actual empirical evidence of it as you move into neuroscience.
There's a growing body of evidence that, as you rightly say, tells us that this is not some kind of reductionistic mindset. That's just a brain that's an organism that has that, but rather there's something more than that. And it's always, in my view, the top down that is the way to see it. The higher levels of understanding and interpretation account for the lower, but the lower can never account for the higher. And so to me, that's another of the phenomena, the hierarchies of meaning. And that's one of the things that you discuss here as well in terms of hierarchies of meaning in so many realms that I think it's absolutely phenomenal. Just the very idea that, as Einstein was putting it, that the most incomprehensible thing about the universe is that it is comprehensible. Amplify your thoughts on that. Einstein's thoughts on that for us.
Yeah, there's so many quotes by Einstein, and some of them are actually by Einstein, and I think that is one of them. A lot of things attributed to him that aren't by him. I think that was one.
I think that's authentic. Yeah.
Yeah, and another guy talked about the unreasonable, and a mathematician, Wigner, talked about the unreasonable effectiveness of mathematics. You're like, what do you mean the unreasonable effectiveness? And what he was saying is, essentially, on a materialistic, atheistic worldview, mathematics should not be so extraordinarily effective at mapping on to the deep realities we're finding in physics and cosmology, chemistry, and yet it does. And for the theist, it's not extraordinary, it's not unexpected, because we would rightly expect that the most intelligent being in the universe and the creator of the universe, God, is a supreme mathematician.
Yes, exactly.
Kepler, for instance, the great astronomer that revolutionized our understanding of the solar system. He essentially cinched the case, if you will, for the heliocentric model with his 3 laws of planetary motion that were very elegant, but they upended this idea that the orbits were perfectly circular. But when he came up with these 3 very mathematically elegant laws, he said, I was thinking God's thoughts after him.
Isn't that a brilliant thing? And that's the progenitors of real science, of empirically based science, really were largely theistic, because it was required that vision of life for us to see why it would be comprehensible, because we are bearers of the Imago Dei. It's the only worldview that really provides a sustenance for that, wouldn't you think?
Yeah, and in multiple ways, the Christian view said the Creator is reasonable, he's a lawgiver. C.S. Lewis talks about this, so we can go look for the underlying laws. His wisdom is connected to ours because we're made in his image. At the same time, we're fallible creatures, the Bible teaches us, and so we should go humbly in search. So rather than saying, well, circular orbits are the perfect shape, and that's obvious, and so they must be circular, end of discussion, Kepler said, maybe God's wisdom is deeper than mine, and I should subject my ideas to empirical testing, even as I look for some deeper, elegant form. And he went and he found it. Bring all those together, and also the incarnation. You have a respect for the material world.
Yes,
you're not trying to flee it in some kind of Platonic disdain or Gnostic disdain for matter, and so you get those early scientists in the the Christian West were willing to get their hands dirty doing experiments.
Yeah, they could see that that God's into the structures of things and the details of things, and then the what we would now later understand as the biochemistry and all the information-rich biomacromolecules, which you'd never even dream of in that time. But each thing, one of the things that I found fascinating about your book, A Meaningful World, was, and the subtitle is How the Arts and Sciences Reveal the Genius of Nature. And I found it to be a very good read in many respects. But one of the most stunning things for me was the periodic table of the elements, because when I was a boy, because I always loved science. And so I went to Case Institute of Technology and studied astronomy there and so forth. But I love both sides of the quantitative as well as the qualitative. So like you, I'm interested in both sides, the poetry as well as the technologies of these things. But in seeing those things together, you begin to realize that you are in a world where God it's almost like a guidebook. And as you were rightly saying, each thing leads us to the next hint. It's like a collection of clues that God's left, so that we are able to get that. And once you've got that key, then we can go and apprehend the next one, like with the alchemists and so forth.
Right, and with Newton's laws. Well, Kepler, he found laws of planetary motion that were elegant and discoverable. Then Newton found, his more laws of gravity and motion that were even more universal.
Yes,
but they weren't precisely accurate. And then you get to Einstein's.
Yes,
but if you'd had to get if none of that had been useful, because we now know that Newton's, as amazing as they were, aren't a precise description of physical reality. If you could only get to the elegant, kind of obvious insight once you got to Einstein or quantum physics, then it never gotten there. But these intermediate steps also had a mathematical elegance and mapped closely.
Yes.
What are the odds?
Yes.
You can ask atheists.
Yeah. And so it becomes a more and more rich and tapestry of design agencies that each one like nested Matryoshka dolls. Remember, each one has a mystery within but you have to open up one to see the next one, and then you open up that one. Oh, there's another one. But it's iterative, isn't it? It's a kind of a process.
Right, and if you see nature as the work of a genius, rather than just happenstance, or even just kind of a bare intelligent designer, you expect those layers, because works of great creative genius have depths to them, whether it's Shakespeare or Mozart, or a beautiful painting. You expect depths to it. You don't expect it all just on the surface and easy peasy.
Yeah. So your analysis of Hamlet, for example, and some of the other components that you were discussing there with just exegeting Shakespeare requires more than just a plot. There's just something there's a richness, a tapestry of poetry and nuance and elegance, and these motifs of themes that are related to the great story, the greatest story ever told. And so I think you're like me, as I love story, and because a story, so that's why I love to teach film and literature and things like this, and poetry, for the very reason that a story well told always points beyond itself to the greatest story ever told.
Yeah, that's something I think C.S. Lewis emphasized.
I think he did.
Others have, yes.
That nature, in effect, has everything in the created order seems to point beyond itself to a moral and spiritual truth, but you have to have the eyes to see and the ears to hear, and therein lies the receptivity.
Yeah. In fact, I'm just remembering something that was Tolkien. When he had befriended C.S. Lewis, Tolkien and one of the other Inklings.
Yeah,
they used that argument with C.S. Lewis when he was a searcher, and he was saying, I find the story of Jesus and the death and resurrection, I find it very compelling, but in some ways it reads a little like a myth.
Yeah.
And they said, well, maybe it's the original myth.
I love that.
And the others are shadows of that and foreshadows of it.
Yeah. That was a major theme in his thinking, wasn't it? It was in Addison's Walk, I think, with Hugo Dyson and Tolkien, and the discovery that epiphany, it seemed to be for him, the realization that what if in fact that the things I've always loved in the best fairy tales and stories, Icelandic epics and so forth, that they actually did happen in space-time history. That epiphany then changed everything for him, didn't it? It was an amazing experience.
If the world is the work of the greatest storyteller, then we can expect to find those themes.
And we're going to find that it's going to be, as you were rightly saying in several of your chapters, one of the things I loved about it is like each piece, once understood, becomes the key to another piece we didn't yet understand, but it opens up questions. Just as anything we learn from the natural world raises new questions we didn't know enough to ask.
Right. Yeah. You go from, physics, astronomy, and then they make progress with chemistry.
Yeah.
People like the Mendeleev, he was trying to fill in the periodic table of elements, and he said, you know what? I think there's an order here. I think there's an underlying order here, and I'm sticking to my guns, and I'm going to go look for elements we haven't found yet that fit the order. Now,
what would it look like? What would it feel like? It was it's an amazing thing, wasn't it?
Yeah, and he subjected his theory to empirical verification. He had the humility to know, well, maybe my notion of octaves in the isn't right, but I feel like there's some underlying order here because I believe in an underlying lawgiver. So that happens again and again in science. So it totally upends the myth that science and the Christian faith are somehow in opposition. Christianity gave birth to science.
Yes. So this notion then of not a reductionistic understanding, but rather something that's so rich in its tapestry that it's a fundamental part of everything. I read this article in Nature not long ago. What if math is a fundamental part of nature, not something humans came up with? Which was a great question. Of course, always that debate. Or did humans just invent it? Of course, to me, it's a both and, because you see, we're both were created by the same order, the one who made it. So it makes sense. But a world made of math, and as we know, Pythagoras was the one who identifies it as one of the languages as used of the architecture. But I just think about these broccolis that look like, there's expressions of the Fibonacci series, and I think about these wonderful things like not just the Fibonacci nature and the cauliflowers and so forth, but also fractal systems like the Mandelbrot set. And then we can see this in so many areas, just Fibonacci numbers and sunflower seeds, pine cones, pineapples, spiral galaxies, and nautilus cells. I just love how these things just reveal a collection of insights that we would have never even dreamed of. And then came across a book that I think you might personally be interested in taking a look. Maybe have you ever come across this book, Jonathan? Patterns in Nature by Philip Ball.
If I have, I've forgotten about it.
Well, it's a beautiful book where he describes how there's symmetry and looks at symmetry, looks at fractals, then spirals, then flow and chaos, waves and dunes, bubbles and foam, arrays and tiling, cracks and spots and stripes. And it's an astonishing journey through these marvels and wonders that are seen in just in terms of these extraordinary symmetries that are found in the natural world.
It's fascinating.
And it's absolutely fascinating. I can't get my eyes off of it. So I just look at these wonders and these things that are in this book. And I'm thinking of just teaching through it, just to walk people through these basic components, because he does such a splendid job. Then he goes to fractals and so forth and does the same with that. But then you just see how everything really connects together, and it's just another way of articulating that. But you were doing something very similar in your book, it seemed to me, in many ways.
Right. Yeah. And we talk about some of the key recurring qualities or characteristics of works of genius.
Uh-huh.
And one of those is depth. One of those is elegance. And so a lot of those things you're showing me there, I would say, would be in some ways an example of both those qualities, because there's kind of a mathematical elegance, whether it's the fractals or the Fibonacci series, 1, 2, 3, 5, 8,
yes,
etc. But then there's a depth in that you often find some of those as you go deeper, as you some of them are, if you can count, you can find it on a sunflower.
Yes.
But then others, as they get more and more powerful microscopes and telescopes, they find new depths of this.
New depths of discovery, yeah. And then it was astonished when I saw that the sunflower, for example, has I forget which number in the Fibonacci series it was, the spiral right, and then there's a spiral to the left that has another fractal number, Fibonacci number. And the combination of these things is just mind-boggling. I have a presentation that I do all these crazy things, but one of them is on diatoms, because I love the things, and about 100,000 species of these things, and some of them are more wonderful, really, than many things that architects have ever even thought of before. So when I look at diatoms and I just look at the structure of these things, trying to find, here's an example of one where this pond scum, it's just these silicate skeletons. This looks like the Sydney Opera House, only it looks better. And this one, what does this look like? The Leaning Tower. And so it's a structure that is just, in my opinion, if an architect took their cue from the natural world, they would actually be further along. And that's why I like Antonio Gaudi as my favorite architect, because there's no straight lines in nature, and none in his work. It's all organic.
Yeah, and there's this systems biology is this burgeoning field where they're just shamelessly going to nature to find biomimetics, to get ideas for new inventions, but then they're also creating these great insights into mysterious biological systems by saying, whether I'm a evolutionist or a design person or a theist, I'm going to go and assume as a working heuristic that this biological subsystem is optimally or near optimally designed, and I'm going to bring that assumption and figure out what's going on here. I don't understand this, this, and this. Yes. I'm going to assume this is optimally designed or near optimally designed and figure it out. And that's been a hugely fruitful approach. And it's just right down the mainstream of biology. And the only difference being some of them that are scared of being called ideas will kind of genuflect, give lip service to Darwinism, but then when they actually get in the lab and do their work, they're basically ID theorists, systems biologists.
They live in this one way, but what is it? The idea it's but design is a woman that no scientist, no biologist can live without, but he's ashamed to be seen with her in public. And so,
right. Yeah, there's I can't remember who said that. That's a famous quote.
It's a brilliant quote, though. But I love it
by a mainstream evolutionist, who's in a moment of great candor.
Great candor and weakness, but at the same time, it's kind of like an epistemic humility. There's a humility that requires me to think God's thoughts, as we were saying, Kepler does, and Copernicus, and all of these great innovators in science, Boyle, and all the others are thinking God's thoughts after him, rather than just trying to create a whole cloth out of their own mind.
Right.
And then learning from it and humbling themselves, and then realizing I'm involved in something that's way more than I could have known. But we know that the impersonal plus chance doesn't produce these things.
Right. And, we see it in very practical ways in recent science. A lot of the evolutionary biologists, when they discovered non-coding DNA, that was just, all over. It's junk DNA.
Junk DNA.
It's the Darwinian natural selection trial and error method. Right. Get everything right, and there's going to be a lot of junk, and so it's junk. Whereas some ID theorists said you might have a little bit of degradation in the cell, so there might be a little bit of stuff that's dysfunctional, but we're betting that this stuff's going to turn out to have function. We just haven't discovered, and that's what's been happening over the last 10, 15 years, where they've been discovering function after function after function with it. And so that's the better approach, to assume genius, assume depths of design, go looking for it, see what you turn up.
Yeah. So it requires a certain measure of humility to do that, because I have to be the one who's instructed by and who learns and is tutored by nature, rather than me trying to impose my narrative upon it.
Right. Absolutely.
It's not our natural thing. Well, tell me more about your book that you've just done with Guillermo Gonzalez, The Farm at the Center of the Universe. It's just coming out. It came out last month, did it?
Yeah, it did. It just came out. I've got a copy here. Very proud of it.
I need to get a copy of that.
Yeah.
Tell me about that. Looks great.
Yeah, it's a youth novel, but we wrote it so that adults could enjoy it too. So it's, I think if you read it, you're not going to roll your eyes.
Yeah.
It's enjoyable. And what we wanted to do is create a story situation that conveyed a lot of the arguments for design. But if we were going to do it well as a story, we needed characters. We needed an antagonist who's on the scene. In this case, it's his older cousin, who's an atheist science teacher.
Okay.
And we give him some good lines. We try. I won't say he's a round character. He's not Hamlet or anything.
Yeah.
But we give him some good arguments and good lines. And the granddad is a retired chemist who's a theist and sees evidence of design. And so those two kind of have at it. And the boy, he's got to kind of sift through this. His father has recently died, and so his cousin's like, well, that's what you expect in a godless world. Nice people die, survival of the fittest. Dog eat dog. And so he's grappling not just with kind of the science, though he's into nature and he's also grappling with the problem of pain. This is a visit to the grandparents' farm.
I see.
During the summer. So they grapple with that, and there's some humor. But the main thing is it's a teaching novel.
Yes.
That we tried to make enjoyable and accessible to cover a lot of the bases. Some of Guillermo Gonzalez, I think you've interviewed him in the past, I think.
I have. Yeah, I recently did it maybe a week or so ago. Yeah.
Yeah, and so he co-authored a book, The Privileged Planet, with Jay Richards.
Yeah.
And which showing how the universe is not only fine-tuned to allow for life, it appears that our place in the universe is also fine-tuned to promote discovery.
That's correct. Yes.
And so there's this weird convergence. So we boil that argument down, but then we also boil some of the famous arguments for ID from Michael Behe, William Dembski, Jonathan Wells, Stephen Meyer. So if you want a short version of it and you want it in story form, and you also want to have something that kind of grapples with the problem of pain, it's all in there in a short novel.
That's really unusual, though, for two people to co-author a novel.
Right. Yeah, it does happen occasionally, but it's not
pretty unusual.
Always easy. But.
Yeah. But I can see, too, how you would select certain components, more of the literary side, and he would focus perhaps on the discoverability of things and the optimal locations and so forth. I'm sure you talk about solar eclipses and a whole array of things of that nature.
Yeah, he brought a lot. He's an astrobiologist who's had his work featured on the front of Scientific American. So he was well equipped scientifically. And then we have at the Discovery Institute, we've got this stable of brilliant scientists we could avail as we kind of tiptoed a little bit out of his areas of specialization. We were able to avail ourselves of that and get their feedback and sharpen everything. So the science is right on the money, and then we tried to develop a good story, and good characters and some conflict.
Yeah, sounds like a very clever thing. And you're right to include the problem of evil, the problem of pain, the problem of suffering, because it raises that larger question at the end of the day. If there is a mind, then how does this happen?
And I think for us, a lot of people that accept Darwinism, that's the principal reason. They say, well, this explains evil and death and decay and violence. And if there was a good God, we wouldn't have any of that. And so I'm just going to shoehorn everything else in. If something Darwinism doesn't quite cut it, so I'm just going to figure, we'll figure it out someday, because there certainly couldn't be a God.
Yeah.
So for some people, you really do have to address that problem of pain and evil and suffering.
That's right. And of course, it's an interesting thing, because the very thing they're appealing to, namely evil, or something that would be something, how could he allow this thing to happen? They have to appeal to an ultimate for it to have any cogency or any meaning. So one of C.S. Lewis's great lines, unless ultimate reality is moral, you cannot morally condemn it. So that at the end of the day, you're appealing to God to refute God. So you have to appeal to some absolute, because if there's evil, then there has to be a good. And so it doesn't work. And furthermore, they have a system that, by their own admission, if they're thinking clearly, knows that a person literally can get away with murder forever. And so there's not a moral universe that we're living in.
Right. And I think, they might say, well, we're just saying that if you think there's morality, then it doesn't make sense because it wouldn't be evil. But if you can get them just to be honest, at a deep level, most people, and Francis Schaeffer was really good on this.
He was.
Most people get that there really is good, there really is evil.
They get it.
Remember, at one point he confronted on a ship. There was this nice couple, and the husband was a non-believer, and he kind of confronted the man with his genuine, tender love for his wife, and he tried not to be harsh about it. But he said, "On your view, that's just all glands and chemistry. And it's just a complete."
Yes.
Illusion. But I don't think at a deep gut level, you really think that, or at least I hope you don't.
Yeah, he called that lifting the roof, where he would take off the roof and expose the logical implications of their non-theistic views.
Yes.
Which nobody can live consistently with. That's one of his basic assumptions that he made, and I think he was absolutely right about that. So the form at the center of the universe then is this place that they visit. Then, and this
right. And you'll have to read the novel to see how it's not works, literally. They don't get on a spaceship and go. And of course, anybody that knows modern cosmology knows that everywhere and nowhere is the center of the universe. But there's a sense in which Earth is so amazingly well configured for life and discovery, and all the other planets we're discovering don't hold a candle to it. And so there's a sense in which we may discover other amazing habitable planets. I'm not holding my breath, but Earth
not holding my breath. You're right.
Earth was, the Copernican principle, which was misnamed.
Yes, it is.
We thought Earth was special and wonderful and was the center of everything, and now we know it's just a meaningless little speck in a vast universe. Well, that's now dated, and we now know, wow, the Earth is really special in a lot of ways, and these people searching for Earth-like planets and who are atheists are desperate to find any other habitable worlds are telescopes aren't quite there yet, but there's a lot of evidence, more and more evidence that Earth is at the very least quite unusual.
Quite unusual at the very least, yeah.
Yes.
And this whole notion then that even led some to the almost nonsensical solution of panspermia, that it was that life came from out. It doesn't take much of a philosopher to realize that that's all you're doing is putting it off one third. Where did that come from?
Yeah, it came either from undirected panspermia, or aliens dropped it off from their planet. Where how'd their planet get? Well,
where'd the aliens come from?
Well, there was another planet that it's turtles all the way down.
It's turtle. That's no use, mister. It's turtles all the way down. That's right.
Right. Yeah.
That's right. That's good. I hope this book does well. It would be a good thing in an educational situation. I'm sure you're.
Yeah, I mean, in an ideal world, it would be so compelling that kids would be rushing out to get it, like Harry Potter. I do think it's a good read, but realistically, it's going to be something that probably mostly parents, teachers give to kids, and then they read it and are surprised. Oh, this was pretty. Yeah, this was pretty effortless, and I learned a lot of things, and it wasn't a slog at all. I think that's probably going to be the main.
I think that's great.
Main audience for it.
Good for you. Well, I've enjoyed our time together. This was fun, and I look forward to being with you on July 13th at the Museum of the Bible. And
that's going to be very stimulating. Looking forward to it.
So it's looking like it'll be well attended, and I think it's going to be it's such a beautiful venue to go to anyway. And then the next day you're in Washington D.C. and you can see any number of wonderful things like the National Gallery of Art and wonderful things of that sort. So, but thank you that you're part of this. And
here's a funny thing. The last time I was in Washington, D.C. was for the grand kind of film premiere of the Privileged Planet documentary, which I helped script, which is based on the book. And that was 18 years ago.
I think I recently revisited it, Jonathan. I didn't know you were involved in the scripting of that, but that was a very nice piece of work. It was the date was 2004, I think. It's almost
farther back than I want to admit. Yeah,
I know you don't want to admit it was 20 years ago, but it's not bad even now. I mean, it doesn't really need serious updating, but it would be nice if you ever did a revised edition.
Yeah, it's mainly just a little bit of the stylistics are a little bit, but the content held up really well. And
did.
But there is, Jay and Guillermo probably mentioned this when you talked to him, they have a 20th anniversary edition of that book coming out.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, later this summer, that's going to update the science. And they made a lot of predictions about what astrobiologists would find. And so far, any ones that have broken, yay or nay, have all broken in their favor.
That's significant right there.
Yeah, so a lot of the atheist anti-ID, it doesn't make predictions. It's not testable ID. Well, they made testable predictions, and a lot of what's being discovered is confirming the privileged planet hypothesis.
That's an excellent thing. Yeah. I just loved Guillermo's galactic habitable zone contribution. That was a brilliant thing.
Yeah. Yeah, not only is there a habitable zone in our solar system, there's a narrow band in the Milky Way galaxy where you're going to have any chance of having a habitable planet. Yeah.
And so as time goes by, there are more and more restraining factors. It gets more elegant, not less. It becomes
more and more special.
Restrained. Which I love. Yeah. So frankly, in my opinion, science, especially and technology, have become more and more force multipliers if we see them correctly as force multipliers of wonder and awe and worship in many ways. And it gives us a greater sense of humility and the capacity for us to even apprehend these things is such a great gift. And what a time we live in.
It is an amazing time. I mean, Psalm 19 says the heavens declare the glory of God. Nature pours forth its speech.
Yes.
And those that say, well, no, science and faith are separate. I want to ask them, so in David's time, before they had telescopes and microscopes, it poured forth speech. But now that we're discovering all these wonders, it somehow doesn't.
It doesn't.
It just doesn't make any sense. And you cut yourself off to so much wonder.
Yes. Yes, you do. The elegance becomes more evident. But again, there's this stubborn refusal. It's the Romans, one, even though they knew God, they didn't honor him as God or give thanks, but they became futile in their speculation. So a spiritual darkness produced an intellectual blindness, and then that led to a moral decay in Romans 1. But it's not a surprise, but David saw that and only could see a few thousand stars. And now what we see are marvels and wonders that reveal much more than we could have ever dreamed of or imagined.
Yeah, it's an exciting time.
Great time to live. I think we're blessed, and blessed to have men like you who are guiding us into this insight.
And thank you for your work, Ken. Two shameless generalists. Let's carry
shameless, on. I tell you, shameless. Have they no shame? Wonderful to be with you, though, and thank you for joining me in our time together. And I'll see you on July 13th.
All right, Ken. Bye-bye.
Yes. Bye.
Thank you for being a part of the Explorers podcast. Please like and subscribe, and we'll see you next time.